It was an overwhelming 99% vote for a 50 basis points rate hike to 18% on Tuesday by 10 out of 12 members of the Nigeria's Monetary Policy Committee. The committee considered quite a number of local and global issues while affirming a few points in the domestic economy. Let's take a dive into all of that, as well as some future forward insight. My guest is Tosin Osunkoya. He's an investment professional and a co-managing partner at Commercial Partners. Great having you on the show. I think it's the first time in the new year.
Yeah, happy new year to you.
Almost 90 days CBO. Okay, so do you think the tightening cycle by the central bank is getting a little bit tight for the economy?
I think so, actually. I'm struggling to see how effective the rate hikes, the aggressive rate hikes, has been since they started last year. I mean, they've done almost about 650 basis points. Last year alone, we saw about 500 basis points. In that year, you need to take cognizance of what happened with the growth in GDP, because the growth in GDP was actually affected. Last year, I think our growth in GDP was just about 3.4 on an annual basis,
yes,
compared to the previous year, which was 3.1. So the way I say it, I think MPC is fixated on increasing the MPR as a way to address and combat inflation. But I don't think that should be the only way. Because if you look at it, when you dimension your inflation, okay, you need to ask yourself what is responsible for it. If it's a demand push inflation, then you understand that what you need to do is to increase the interest rate. But if it's a cost push, in this case, it's actually a cost push. So what they are doing is, the moment they continue to increase, okay, you will have a significant impact on your cost push. And so right now, you will be struggling.
My point is, how do we fix this? What else needs to be done to rein in inflation?
Well,
outside using monetary policy tool of rate hikes? So in this environment,
Boason, the only thing we're using right now is just the monetary tools and through MPR.
And any other tools?
Well, I don't even think that it should just be the CBN handling or combating inflation. They should also look at the fiscal side of it. The fiscal authority should come to the table to see how coordinately they can, address this inflation. For instance, I don't know if you're aware that we've been having fuel scarcity for what, almost 4 to 5 months now?
Exactly.
That certainly is going to impact on your transportation cost. And transportation cost cuts across all sectors.
Logistics.
Exactly.
And it goes all the way down to consumer goods, industrial goods,
absolutely,
consumables, everything else.
Absolutely. That's one. Then two, you have insecurity as well. That has not been addressed. CBN cannot address insecurity in the country. That has to be addressed by the fiscal authorities. Then if you look at the flooding, when you mention logistics, we're talking about products moving from the market. Moving from the farm to the market.
And from industries and factories to the
absolutely.
seaports.
So those are major issues that will certainly impact your inflation. And that cannot be addressed by increasing interest rates.
All of that put together, how do they impact productivity?
So here's the thing, it will impact productivity negatively. And that's why we saw a contraction last year. Because when you increase interest rates, the ability of borrowers of funds, I'm talking about large, manufacturing companies, the likes of flour mills, Dangote Cement, to come to the market to raise money, they will be raising money at a high rate. And guess who's going to suffer for it at the end of the day? They are going to pass on the cost of that to the end users. So the prices of goods and services will continue to move up.
Do you align with the retention of the cash reserve ratio and liquidity ratio, by the way, 32.5 and 30% each? Those parameters were left unchanged.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to keep it that way. I mean, if you look at what is happening globally, it has become apparent now that banks should actually keep a decent amount of cash reserves and also invest in liquid assets as well. I'm sure you've heard about what happened with
the
SVB.
Silicon Valley,
exactly.
Credit Suisse, and all that.
So I think what we're doing back home, I think is the right thing. I think it's important for us to keep it at those decent levels.
And for how much longer?
That's a good question. I think that at some point you will need to encourage lending, okay, and encourage the banks to lend more.
How do we stimulate that?
So, one of the ways by which you can do that is moral suasion, because you cannot force a bank to lend if they've done their own risk parameters and they ask themselves they cannot go above a certain limit. They cannot lend more than what their books can take. But right now you have about what? 2 trillion coming into the market. Your aggregate money supply had increased because of the currency swap. So those money sitting with the banks would need to find some, decent assets, and those decent assets have to be loans and advances.
Those assets shouldn't be financial instruments. Should they all go into productive sector? Because this is cheap money. There's so much cheap naira.
Yeah.
And the simple economics is that you use cheap naira locally or cheap local currency to do productive activities.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So when you borrow or you lend to the real sector, it's important for you to understand that the dynamics of the real sector is different from that of the financial, instrument.
Services industry.
Exactly.
Yes.
So if, for instance, I'm a bank and I dissect the risk in a manufacturing company, for instance, I need to ask myself, are there demand for the products of the manufacturing company? If everybody is struggling to have access to cash, that means that you will see those manufacturing companies suffering in terms of people buying their products. So right now, the cash swap had created that particular devil because people are struggling to get cash to buy those products and those goods and services.
So, do you think there's a change in monetary policy direction could happen? What would happen when the new administration comes in June?
Okay, so the president-elect had said a few things, about the fact that he's going to remove the fuel subsidy. He's also going to harmonize, the FX, regime. I think that it's important for him to do that. Right now, you would agree with me that we've stayed in that range of 2 parallel rates for a long time. It's important for us to harmonize this. If we harmonize this could potentially attract foreign investors into the market. For instance, you are at 461 in the high earning window.
Yes.
You're at 760
on the street.
If you harmonize it around 600 and 650, potential investors who believe that there will be reforms at the back of this will begin to think about coming into the country. So that could bode well for Nigeria. Then the removal of fuel subsidy as well. However, the challenge with the removal of fuel subsidy is it could impact on your energy cost, because the moment you remove it, your energy cost is going to skyrocket. And when that happens, it's going to affect your inflation. So yesterday the CBN governor was saying that, if removal of fuel subsidy comes into play, that they might continue to address inflation by increasing interest rates.
So from June, we're likely to see inflation and interest rates tight. So we should all prepare for second half of 2022.
Absolutely.
Or 2023, I beg your pardon.
2023.
It's going to be an interesting time.
But what you observe is the size at which they've increased is also very important. So last year they did 150, 100 in January.
Yes.
Now they're doing 50. So you might see them seeing a small size, but the frequency could be still consistent.
Maybe 25.
Maybe 25 or 50. They might maintain a 50, but they need to see the impact of the removal of fuel subsidy. What could counter that is the global prices. The global oil prices could potentially give us some sort of respite. If it comes below, right now you're at $75. If it goes back to 60 or 50, that could bode well for Nigeria, obviously, because you're removing fuel subsidy.
At a time when oil prices are a bit at the low end of the table.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
It's good to see you back.